and welcome back to this channel. I am the Spell Singer, and this is the ongoing review of the Fighting Fantasy series of Gamebooks. And in this review, I'm going to give you a quick look at this title and its book number. I'll quickly read the blurb, take a look at the plot, we'll check out the game mechanics, and look at the adventure sheet. I'll run the artwork through this video as usual, and then look at some of my own likes and dislikes. Any fun facts I might have come up with, any errors. I'll give a summary and a score out of 10, and I'll finish on a shout out. Before I get into all that, I just want to say a little thank you to 5 random subscribers, just to show some appreciation. So we've got thanks to David Van Patten, Gavin Shute, Chris Reed, Bruno Amato Raim, and Zabulon. Thank you very much. So let's review this book. So this is book number 31. This is Battleblade Warrior. And this came out in 1988. So I'd have been 11 years old. And this cover, very striking, probably what helped me buy the book in the first place was by David Gallagher. And it's a really striking cover. I mean, that really does draw you in. The internal artwork is by good old Alan Langford. So Alan Langford is back, giving us lots of this really cool kind of prehistoric artwork. But the author was Mark Gascoigne. So let's read the blurb. And this one says, "The fate of Vymorna lies in your hands. For 6 years, Vymorna has been besieged, but soon it must fall to the evil lizard men. Day after day you fight alongside your war-weary mother, Queen Perriel, but only divine assistance can save you now. And then the great Lord Telak appears in a dream. You are the chosen one to seek out the weapon which will aid you and your city against the dark forces. Your mission will be fraught with danger, but you must succeed. You are Vymorna's only hope." Okay, so that is the blurb that goes with this adventure, and this leads on to the plot. So with this one, Battleblade Warrior is set obviously in the fighting fantasy world of Titan and the continent of Alancia, and it kind of revolves around this besieged city of Vymorna, as it mentions in the blurb, this city, and you assume the role of the city's prince, who, upon receiving that vision from the blurb, that kind of dream of the god Telak, you kind of slip out through the ranks of all these invaders that are around your city in pursuit of, a means to end this invasion once and for all. And the real adventure for this one, it kind of presents itself when you have a dream, like I say, like this vision, where you're visited by your god Telak, and he tells you to find this fella called Lascar, and you've got to seek him out, and he knows the kind of hidden location of 2 mystical items that can help save Vymorna from falling. So you've got to find these 2 essential, or so you think are essential, items to kind of win this war. So it's not the most original premise, but it's presented so well that you kind of just want to keep reading and get to the end of this adventure. And then you have to decide on how to break through this siege that's going on outside your doorstep. So you get a bunch of options, which is quite nice. Option A is to head down this river that you can jump on, or nick someone's boat and jump on this boat and escape. Or you can take option B, which is kind of sneaking out under cover of night through this encampment of all these lizard men, which is an interesting one. Or you can take the final option, which is option C, obviously charging into the fray and hacking your way out with some pals, and just ploughing straight through them. So yeah, drawbridge down and charge. So there's 3 really nice open ways to sort of start this adventure, and they all have their own advantages and disadvantages. So after the usual instructions, at the beginning of this book, all the rules, there are also 5 pages of background, which goes into some really nice detail of your past, and all the problems that are facing Vymorna and your kingdom. And then your city, like I say, is under attack from the mighty Lizardmen Empire. And you have to, you've been ordered to travel far to the north, east of this kingdom to find this weapon, that you were told of by Telak. And that's the only way you can, win over this battle, this ongoing war. So straight away, you're thrown into the midst of a kind of violent battle, and also given those 3 different options from the start. So kind of shows this real strength of this book in a similar way to, some of those early, especially those lone wolf books, that kind of expansive feeling of being in a diverse and really exciting land. Yeah, so that's the objective, that's the plot. Like I say, not too dissimilar to your average one, but this one is written really well and is a lot of fun. But let's take a look at the game mechanics and that adventure sheet as well. So player, yourself, you can carry up to 4 provisions in this book at any one time. But you can only eat 1 at any one occasion. So that's a bit different. Usually you start off with your 10 provisions and you can more or less eat them whenever you get hungry or you've taken a bit of a beating. But in this one, you just get the 4. You can't go over that. So you're on a back foot a bit. But also you get a choice of 3 special items right at the start. And those special items are a bow and 3 silver arrows, a bottle of Perriel liquid, and a small glass globe filled with all this swirling sort of dust specks. Now, the bow and arrow, they're quite special. They have this kind of carved charms or sigils that are engraved into the actual bow. And when you're offered the choice, it can guarantee you a very quick end to any battle with any opponent. So it's a really cool weapon, but of course you only get those 3 special arrows. So that's quite nice. The Perriel liquid, that's like a healing balm, essentially, so it can cure your wounds, and you get 2 doses of it. And the way this works is, when you want to use it, you roll a d6, you add 2, and this is the number of stamina that you can raise it by. And the final one was that glass globe. This contains fragments of petrified glowworms. And you can use this as a kind of lantern by shaking it, and the glow will kind of hang around for a short period of time. Kind of makes you think, oh, we're going to be heading into a dungeon at some point, so a good item to have, right? But otherwise the game mechanics are relatively straightforward. No real difference in the combat or anything, just those sort of changes to the provisions and those cool items. And that leads on to the adventure sheet. So here you can see you've got standard skill, stamina and luck, and you've got your items of carried equipment, of which there aren't too many things to carry in this adventure. There aren't loads of essential items, but you've got your special items there as well, where you record obviously that choice of those 3 options that are offered to you, those 3 items, and then obviously your provisions remaining. So nothing too groundbreaking, no special rules, just a couple of kind of caveats around those 3 special items, but otherwise it's all good. Let's chat a bit about the artwork. Now there's a colour map which I'll put up here. This is on the inside front cover by Leo Hartus, and he always does the cover maps really well for these books. He's shown up a lot in these last few, and he's got a few more to come. But whenever you see an inside cover map in colour, you can guarantee that it was good old Leo Hartus that's done the artwork for this one in particular. It's really nice. I mean, the typical map, it doesn't really help you in the mission, but it does give you an idea, the lay of the land and where everything kind of sits. So that's really nice. But David Gallagher is an artist, an illustrator whose work has appeared in a number of fighting fantasy related publications. So of course he did this amazing front cover, which is just very striking and really kind of draws you into the adventure and makes you start thinking about what could be going on. So very evocative piece of artwork. But for the internal stuff, we've got Alan Langford. So back on the internal duty, and he perfectly depicts that kind of lizard man, semi-prehistoric nature, which adds a lot of consistency to some of Livingstone's books, like Island of the Lizard King. Again, Langford was on the job there and doing some really great illustrations, and consistency just sort of plays throughout this series of books. Very easy to recognise his work. He has a special technique for portraying these kind of lizard-like, or lizard-esque creatures. Really great. The cover, like I mentioned, hints at like lizard men riding this flying dinosaur. Really special. A lot of depth and detail in some of these images. Really, really quite amazing artwork for this book. I really like Langford's work, but mixed with, David Gallagher. Yeah, what a team. And that leads on to this image here, which is my fave picture. And it is shocking. You've got obviously this Lascar fella looking down into the crevice where the city has fallen. And if you like, I'll read out the reference that goes with it, just to give you an idea about what Langford is trying to convey here. So it says, in the morning, Lascar asks you to follow him from the cavern, making no mention of last night's activities. You climb high up into the hills until suddenly the old man stops and points down over the edge of a vast ravine. You look to where his arm indicates and find yourself staring at an entire city, which lies across the floor of the ravine. Karnak, city of the warrior kings, now accursed, he says. I've spent all my life in studying its secrets, but there have always been places that have defeated me. Down there in the depths of the royal palace are the deathless ones, the warriors who will sleep no more. I am too old for combat, but you, well, I think you will be safe. Of course. Down there somewhere, the legends have always said, are the arm and the eyes of Telak, the great hope from your dreams. So yeah, that is such a great picture. And I think it's my fave in this in this entry. Right, my likes and dislikes for Battleblade Warrior. Some of my dislikes, the final act kind of sees you thrown into a kind of generic dungeon crawl, entering various rooms containing sort of monsters and treasure. So it sounds a bit like Death Trap Dungeon. So nothing too new there. Your real reason for being here is to find the arm and the eye of Telak, which is obviously quite easy. There are multiple paths leading to them, so that's it's not too strenuous to actually find these two items. They'll lead you there, where they're hidden pretty quickly. The eye is this gem, and there are 4 different types of gems in the dungeon, so you've got to get the right one. Only one of which is obviously the correct stone, and the correct stone is also a pair. It's split, so that's quite cool. However, if you do not manage to find the arm of Telak, that's fine, because when you reach the end, a lizard man appears with it anyway. So it's funny because you always get that kind of, oh, it's an essential item, typical Ian Livingstone, it's essential, you have to have it, and rightly so. By the time you get to the end, if you don't have it, it's curtains. But not in this one. In this one, you just acquire it at the end if you didn't manage to pick it up yourself. So, bit weird. So this dungeon crawl, it's kind of, it's a section that's simply direction choosing, monster fighting, item hunting, and then there's this sort of mediocre showdown with the traitor at the end, which is little more than a few skill tests. You do a bit of jewel picking choice, and then you just turn to 400, and it's a bit of an anticlimactic ending. The sword of Telak is the arm of Telak is a sword, and strangely conjures up this magical army right at the end that destroys the lizard man force, and then Vymorna is saved. And it's all wrapped up in a neat little bow, which we're not used to. After the likes of some of the previous books, we kind of like those more cerebral endings where it's not all spelt out for us. But this is all, I don't know, maybe they were trying to target or reintroduce some new readers that were maybe a bit younger, because it's not a tough book. But otherwise, it's a solid book. It's fine. There's just that dungeon crawl at the end, and it'll be easy. However, I've got some fun facts. So in some editions of the book, it's mistakenly said that the copyright page, David Gallagher, was also responsible for the interior illustrations, but they're clearly Alan Langford. I mean, if you seen enough books illustrated by Alan Langford, then the illustrations will stand out like a sore thumb. They're very much his style. But yeah, there are a couple of publications that say that it was actually David Gallagher who did the cover. That also did the inside, but no, that's not correct. So yeah, you only have to compare his artwork to Islands of the Lizard King, and you can see they're like, for the lizard men certainly, and Portal of Evil for the kind of prehistoric dinosaurs. Other editions have Langford correctly receiving this copyright, but yeah, I think a few escaped the net. Not forgetting the author, although his only published Fighting Fantasy Gamebook, which this was, he had a major influence on the Fighting Fantasy franchise. This included the writing the advanced Fighting Fantasy source books, Black Sand and Alancia, and of course he also did Titan, which everyone owns, right? Yeah, so there's a lot going on. There's a couple of fun facts for you. A couple of errors. Now, while you're breaking out of Vymorna, you're by force. You can fight the Lizard Man champion on reference 333. Now, you can fight him an infinite number of times, and if you don't defeat him, but this depends on your stamina score, of course. But yeah, 333, it kind of makes mention of you having encountered it. It doesn't make mention of you having encountered him before, so you can fight him again and again, and each time it's like, who is this guy, that I gotta fight? You don't recognize him, even though you could potentially have battled him several times. Now, the real error with that is that you can face him again and again, even if you defeat him. So if you beat him, you are able to still find a loophole where you can fight him again. Yeah, anyway. So beyond the woods, east of the orc funeral, which I'll touch on again in a moment, you meet this person called Katya. So an NPC on reference 396, a female messenger from Coppertown, which is far up in the north. Now, she has come to fetch help, and her horse is now sort of near to death because of the journey, and so there's all that going on. But if you choose to travel with her on reference 113, you set up camp along the road, and her horse dies during the night. In the morning, you set up on foot together. Yet in the next paragraph, 272, the story describes the two of you as riding along the road. Riding on what exactly? It's continuity thing, so nothing to lose sleep over. Also, when you're trying to sneak past a guard on reference 237, you've got to do a skill test, okay? That's fine. But the reference numbers are swapped. So a skillful outcome being directed to 121 instead of the correct reference, 37. So they've just got the outcome wrong, so an unsuccessful skill roll is taking you to the successful reference. So yeah, just a case of swapping them over. That was it really, so yeah, not too many. Okay, let's do a summary and a score for Battleblade Warrior. So, like I say, you're a prince of the city kingdom, and your father died recently in the siege of Vymorna by the evil lizard warriors from the Lizardman Empire, and it's now you whom the god of courage, Telak, commands to kind of fight back, defeat, turn the tide, as it were. And the objective is to travel to the mountain called Lord Telak, I think you pronounce it, and locate a powerful weapon to stop the invaders, being that sword and eye of Telak. And aside from a kind of quaint scene involving an orc funeral, this campaign is a bit of a strange one. The enemies aren't too tough. There are some instant deaths here, but the setting is kind of quite bland. It's nothing new, certainly nothing we haven't seen in previous kind of fantasy medieval romps that have been written to this point. The descriptions are kind of generic. The characters you meet are a bit nondescript. And the villains are a bit one-dimensional as well. Gascoigne's superb writing is evident, don't get me wrong, as is his knowledge and sort of creativity when it comes to the lore. But you quickly come to the conclusion that maybe Gascoigne cannot extend his obvious other talents into designing a game book. That might sound a bit harsh, but it's how I felt when I was reading this one. The book begins with those three different openings. There are different situations with difficulty ranging from easy to hard. So that's a good balance. for a challenge, you know, in the design, and it kind of allows a lot of replayability as well due to its open world feel. Two of the options, they kind of lead to the same sequence of events, which is riding a lizard to freedom out of Vymorna, you know, out of your city to freedom whilst being pursued by these angry lizard men. But it's possible to avoid the fighting by heading to the river. So that was that third option. And, you know, it's a nice approach rather than sort of the usual gamebook railroading that can sometimes happen. You know, so that's quite a nice thing where, you know, the book tries to make you deal with whatever the book wants you to deal with. So it's quite nice to have a bit of an open world experience right at the start of this book. The fighting your way out approach at the beginning is interesting. It's quite well handled too. You know, charging to almost certain death, and it's entirely down to dice rolls really, and a bit of random choice whether or not you will succeed in this. Initially, you choose from a set of sort of sections to turn to, and then this decides what fight you will have first. So, for example, if you roll up a weak character, you know, at the beginning when you're doing your stats, and you choose, you can choose an easier way, you know, out of the siege, and you still have a chance. You know, roll up a character that's strong, then you could choose one of the harder routes, you know, before running off on your pursuit of adventure. So that's quite nice. So yeah, it's not all over if you get that skill 7, stamina 14 kind of character. You know, you can take that river route and take the easy option. So having escaped the siege, however, you either head out into the plains on a kind of sort of lizard romp, or sail up the river to a jungle. The plains are quite long compared to the brief jungle stint, but the plains route also takes in the jungle route. So that's, you know, that makes sense to take that route. You get a lot more bang for your buck. And then next comes the part where you find Lascar, who tells you that you need to destroy, you need to go to this destroyed city, the sunken city that was in that image that I liked. Which is where the items are, you know, the eye and the gem of Telak. And, you know, this is the dungeon crawl section where you discover that Lascar, spoiler alert, better get that in there. So he's the traitor. Yeah, Lascar is the traitor. Yeah, and that's where you discover then the meaning that you have to deal with, obviously, this problem. You know, him being a traitor has got to deal with all that stuff before you turn to 400. There's a nice little section just as you go into this city, you know, into that ruined city, where you can just decide. There's two options. You can go in, or you can just stand back and take it all in. And if you do that, you spot Lascar off in the distance chatting to some lizard men. So already you're thinking, that's a bit sus. I thought it was quite a charming little touch to it. There's a really fun section in this book describing an orc funeral that I mentioned earlier. And this is one of the highlights of the book for me. It makes good use of Gascoigne's lore, you know, orc society. The funeral plays out in a really interesting kind of manner, with the chance to eat some orc flesh, if that's your poison, or you can have a drink of Gersh, which is like a orc ale. So it's a really nice description there, some really good detail. An earlier choice, just before the orc funeral actually, you get the chance to disguise yourself as an orc as well. So if you do this, then it kind of leads to some different options while you're at the funeral. So that's quite nice. It's fun. It's pretty gross, but it's a fun little area, and it shows Gascoigne's kind of inventiveness. However, it ultimately doesn't serve any purpose either. So it doesn't matter if you miss the whole thing, but it's a really nice place to visit if you're just having a bit of a laugh. I like the non-player characters in this, Lecart and Katia. Lecart is there to kind of save you from your pursuers when you leave Vymorna, but Katia is somewhat underused, which is a shame, and really just there to lead you to that orc funeral, which, like I say, doesn't really matter if you miss it. So, yeah. That and riding a dead horse. The main issue with the book, though, is it's too easy, and that's not me blowing my horn. It really isn't difficult to complete. It's surprisingly short. And you can expect victory on the, maybe first or second attempt, depending on, how good you are at these game books. It's a bit strange, as there are many strong fights, so you'd think that would play into it, but none of them are essential. You can avoid most of them. So there's that. There's lots of skill and luck tests, The book is non-linear, so other than finding that eye, the eye of Telak and that sword, there's no real true path as such. But yeah, given the number of luck tests you have to pass, you would expect there to be the sort of potential to recover and get luck bonuses, but there aren't many of them. So yeah, make sure you roll high luck on this one. All of this combined with the fact that finding Lascar or the arm of Telak if not finding them is impossible. You will find them. You can't really get through this game without bumping into both of those. Yeah, so it makes for a bit of an unsatisfying kind of ending to it. It's quite, I don't know, anticlimactic, I think we said. There is some excitement to be had at the beginning, but the pace is later maintained through, that short and slightly undeveloped dungeon crawl. It's saying, I don't know, maybe for me it just seemed a bit rushed. There's also no explanation as to why the siege is happening in the first place. This battle that's going on outside, it's just happening. We don't really find out, I don't think. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I don't think we find out why that's all kicking off. So one thing that works really well is the consistency with the premise, in that the lizard men turn up at various stages, throughout the book while you're on your adventure, and they're still entrenched in the plot, right at the end. So that's quite cool. So Battleblade Warrior, it's very playable, but overall it can be a bit forgettable, bit of an uninspiring adventure, both due to the ease and the lack of design and mechanics. Gascoigne writes very well, and this book never gets boring, but the way it starts with a sort of brilliantly developed opening siege and escape, only to be followed by a series of sort of empty romps, leads to a game book that's a bit too short and simple. I don't know, maybe a bit of a missed opportunity. And so for that reason, I would probably give this book 6 out of 10 for Battleblade Warrior. I'm going to do a shout out. There's someone I found on YouTube, HJ Doom, and they do these podcasts, and in amongst them, they've read through not only the entire Fighting Fantasy series, little playthroughs, but also loads of other books, modern and old. So Lone Wolf's on there, Bloodsword, and then you've got a few more modern ones. And it's quite nice, actually. He's very funny, and he's worth checking. Check out his site and have a listen to some of those podcasts. He's got a really good humour for that kind of thing, when it's just the voice. So yeah, check him out, HJ Doom. Okay, that's my review of Battleblade Warrior. I hope you like that. It's a good little book, and probably a good one to get started on, because it's not tough. But yeah, check it out, and maybe leave a comment, maybe share it if you liked it, maybe subscribe to the channel. The next book I'm going to do is book 32, which is Slaves of the Biz, which is a really weird book. But I'm going to do that one next. So in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.